So here we are thinking again about section 2, the notorious section 2 in paper 1, which is the imaginative writing section. And we've been through this a few times, but let's clarify exactly what it is that are some of the really key things to think about in a short sort of frame of reference, because you know how to what this is, what's expected of you in this particular section. The first thing, of course, that people neglect is their quality of emotive language. That's language that's obviously getting the reader excited or interested, or creating tension, or creating some kind of purpose to what's going on here. Now, you only have 40 minutes and you've got a very, very short amount of space to create some kind of tension, some kind of engagement, something that's intriguing and interesting. And if you do that, your discovery is not going to be small or lacking in sort of development or anything like that, or cliched or boring. It's going to be subtle, skillful, sophisticated, or well developed. And they're the words of A. Range responses. Here's an example from the novel Of Mice and Men. Now, Of Mice and Men is not a very long novel. It's only 100 and something pages. And it gets to the emotional quick very, very immediately. And we look at here at the character Lenny, and Lenny is here being played by John Malkovich. Lenny is a large man, sort of big in every way, but he has the mind of like a 6-7-year-old. He's very childlike, and therefore he presents a lot of difficulties for George, who is his travelling companion. And it's in the 30s, in the Depression, and Lenny has stuffed up again. He's to the point where he's almost a creature that George decides needs to be put out of his misery. And so Lenny's going through his own emotional crisis in this moment because of what he's done. You can see the bit I've highlighted here. Aunt Clara was gone, and from out of Lenny's head there came a gigantic rabbit. It sat on its haunches in front of him, and it waggled its ears and crinkled its nose at him, and it spoke in Lenny's voice too. Now, the rabbit's there because that's his obsession, is sort of tending rabbits and looking after rabbits on this farm, which is what he wants to do. So that's the metaphor that's going on here. 10 rabbits, it said scornfully. You crazy bastard, you ain't fit to lick the boots off no rabbit. You'd forget 'em and let 'em go hungry, that's what you'd think. And what would George think? I would not forget, Lenny said loudly. The hell you wouldn't, said the rabbit. You ain't worth a greased jack pin to ram you into hell. Christ knows George done everything he could to jack you out of the sewer, but it didn't do no good. If you think George gonna let you 10 rabbits, you're even crazier than usual. He ain't. He's gonna beat hell out of you with a stick, and that's what he's gonna do. Now Lenny retorted belligerently. He ain't neither. George won't do nothing like that. I knew George since. I forgot when, and he ain't never raised his hand with me with a stick. He's nice to me. He ain't gonna be mean. Well, he's sick of you, said the rabbit. He's going to beat hell out of you and then go away and leave you. He won't, Lenny cried frantically. He won't do nothing like that. I know George. Me and him travels together. But the rabbit repeated softly over and over. He's going to leave you, you crazy bastard. He's going to leave you all alone. He's going to leave you, you crazy bastard. Lenny put his hand over his ears. He ain't. I tell you he ain't. And he cried, Oh, George, George. George came quietly out of the brush, and the rabbit scuttled back into Lenny's brain. George said quietly, What the hell are you yelling about? Quite an effective, emotive scene there for Lenny, breaking down really about what's going on in his own head, about his own errors and his own faults and his own weaknesses, and blaming himself for the situation and so forth. So we get what you might consider to be the emotional words in this particular phrase. And so you look, say, you've got the repetition of things like you crazy bastard. Tantamount to swearing in many ways, very evocative language, very, very brutal language. The term crazy bastard, repeated and repeated, shows the depth of self-hate that's going on at this point for Lenny, and how much he's struggling to cope with his own identity. So that phrase, and it's used effectively and well, creates an emotional core to this sequence, okay? You get sort of this kind of language here, grease jack pin to ram you into hell. You get these allusions and metaphors and hyperbole that's going on at this point, because that is the level of emotional trauma that he is actually experiencing. And so the language turns to emotional traumatic style of language. And we get this, he's going to beat hell out of you with a stick. The aggression, the violent imagery and so forth really brings to the fore the crux of Lenny's deterioration in how he's seeing things and how he's seeing the world and so forth like that, and his own internal conflict. We get other words in there like frantically, which the narrator brings in. Okay, and then finally, of course, we're settled down because we have this George actually being quiet. Okay, and it gives us a sense of relief that George isn't going to do all these horrible things that Lenny feels that he's going to do, and the franticness and the tension and the anxiety in Lenny is finally let go of when George turns up, and it removes that evil, image of the rabbit from his head, and it calms him down, and he's able to actually converse properly. Other words like he's sick of you and so forth. Very, very good, exceptionally strong writing. The other thing you'll note is that it works in terms of its rhythms, and it works in terms of its imagery, its allusions, all those kinds of things, as well as Lenny's voice, which is incorrect and has broken language. It's very clear that that's Lenny, because when the narrator comes in, we still have good language, like retorted belligerently. So the writer's still very much in control of what they're doing in terms of language. And you need to do that in your own writing. Don't be afraid of emotive imagery, emotive words. You don't overplay it, you don't overdo it, you don't strangle the words with emotion all the time, but at the correct moment, you allow the emotion to come through and to the fore. Okay, so emotive language, really, I'm starting with that because that's the crux and the key. You think, discovery and adjectives and synonyms and all this business, and get stuck up in all that cake recipe stuff. I've got to have a metaphor, and I've got to have personification. I've got to have great. But you also have to have an emotional core to what you're writing about. There has to be a purpose and a reason for the discovery, be it what you will, to take place. And the only way you can do that is to develop an emotional sense in your writing. Very, very important. So my advice to you is to go to bits that you've read before, and start to unpack those emotional phrases and language and so forth, and attend to how it works. That's the key. The second thing, of course, is rhythm and pace. Okay, it's very important that you vary your sentence structure, but not to the point of distraction. So it's important also that you think, okay, if I've got 5 words per sentence, I need to mix that up. If it's going sentence full stop, sentence full stop, sentence full stop, I'm in a bit of trouble. And the way you can break that up is through dialogue. Be confident with dialogue, because dialogue creates a lovely rhythm. People talk in rhythmical ways to each other. That creates, again, going back to emotion. And dialogue's really important. Dialogue I refer to as the weapon in writing. Okay, dialogue is never ever, I've used the word here, redundant. Dialogue's never boring. It's never, oh, look over there, I can see a tree. Oh, here comes a postman. That is just awful. That's the stuff you don't want to do. Dialogue's a weapon. It's the stuff of revelation. So it either reveals something about a character or how someone feels about another character. Okay, or it's the stuff of exposition. It drives the narrative forward. So you don't actually waste time with dialogue. So if it's revelation, if it's something internal about the character says something that might be surprising or unusual to set the story into a new and more frantic course. Or they might say something about someone else. They might suggest that there's a certain way of thinking about someone else, and that's kind of important. Finally, as well, get rid of redundancies and sort of day-to-day speak. Things like, for example, people say, where are you at? The word at is completely redundant. Where are you? Is a perfectly workable sentence. Question mark. Where are you? Not where are you at? It's just awful when people say that. Okay? What are you doing now? What are you doing? Question mark. The now is completely redundant because you'll be asking, what are you doing 10 years ago? Because then, firstly, it doesn't make grammatical sense. And secondly, it doesn't make grammatical sense. It's stupid. So keep thinking about redundancies and tidy up your language. The more you do that, the more effective your rhythm, your pacing, your timing, your moments. They feel more controlled. That's the key. You all know show, don't tell. You're likely, as I said, sick of hearing it. Hemingway there saying, show the readers everything, tell them nothing. So that means that in terms of narration, when we go back to Lenny, he's belligerent. Okay, that one word is all we need to suggest the characterful moment of what's going on there. We don't need to describe everything that's happening to him at that particular point in time. It just needs to be one or two words to help us out. Okay, so here there's an image of a forest, you can just say, there's a forest, which is showing, okay? What you can say with telling, what you can say with showing is you might be able to describe the lack of light, you might be able to describe the sense of calm, the smells, the sounds, things like that as you're going. And make some attempts on that. Do some writing about the familiar that plays around with that showing element. Think about, think about de Botton with the way he writes about, the travel around the bedroom. That's a classic example of show, don't tell. Think about, say, for standard students, think about the language used by Ruan Barney as opposed to the description of Ruan Barney that shows us what type of character is through what they say. Course discovery, that's the thing you've got to write about, all about the rubric. And one more time, because why not? There it is there. You know what it is. I'm going to put this up onto your canvas, at least advanced I can do that, but you know that you are all about the words in that rubric. You need to go back to that and make the important highlights. You know how to do that.